Paradigm does not claim to have all the answers. We simply desire to be better each day. We make videos in the hope that other people that desire the same can use some of the tools we've discovered along our journey.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paradigm Podcast. We're extremely grateful you took some time to tune in and check out what we're putting up. So in this episode, we're going to cover David Goggins' new book, Never Finished, which was released December 4th, 2022. This marks his second book and obviously caught our interest immediately. So first, we'll dive into a little bit of Goggins' background to illustrate, who David Goggins is and how we came to know him. So we became privy to David Goggins before reading and creating a playlist covering each chapter of his first book, Can't Hurt Me. That'll be in the cards, either here or here. Go ahead and click there if you're interested in getting a chapter by chapter breakdown of his first book, Can't Hurt Me. And we highly recommend you pick that book up as well before reading this one. It'll make a lot more sense. So if you don't know who David Goggins is, which I would find extremely surprising, he is an exemplary example of what it means to be resilient and determined. Goggins was born in 1975 in Buffalo, New York, to his parents Jackie and Trunis. He has faced numerous challenges in his life, including parental abuse from his dad, to put it lightly, racism, poverty, slow mental development, falling into the wrong crowds, obesity, and downright depression. In an effort to change who he was and in turn the life he was living, he formulated a new multifaceted mindset. This included accepting responsibility, being accountable to himself, taking people's souls, armoring his mind, embracing the suck, and asking what if. Through the mindset he developed, he achieved a myriad of amazing things. These achievements include losing 106 pounds in 3 months to have a chance at Navy SEALs Buds, going through Hell Week 3 times, once on broken legs, Army Ranger School, jumping out of planes with a hole in his heart, running ultra marathons, the first of which was on 3 days' notice, the San Diego One Day. And the list goes on and on. Most impressive to me is that he wrote a testimonial to tell his audience that they can create an amazing life for themselves too. Now, if you want a comprehensive breakdown of who David Goggins is and his background and character, we highly recommend you pick up both books. So go ahead and pick that up. The links to those on Amazon will be down in the description box below if you're interested. So the purpose of today's episode is just to go over the entire book. So we read it. It was very good. So we're going to do a breakdown of the philosophies he brings up in this book and the various stories. So why did we choose this book? We actually saw a comment in one of our past videos, and that should be popping up as a graphic here. People were asking, hey, do a never finished video. And we were going to get around to it, but we finally did that, and it caught our interest, and so we decided to go ahead and do that now. So shout out to you guys commenting down below. We see it, and we're happy to oblige. So
let us know the next book, too.
Yeah. Drop
some
comment down
recommendations, because that's really cool.
So first things first, what was your guys' favorite story within Never Finished and why? So we'll start with John. John, you're muted.
He is muted.
Sorry. My favorite story, and I wrote this down as I was reading it because this was my favorite one. It was chapter 5. It's called Disciple of Discipline. And the story, it starts with his post-ultra, and his body's like unraveling. And in this time, he says he likes to find the crevices in his mind where he's I guess the most scarred. And he's remembering in time of Sergeant Jack, which is his grandfather. And in this chapter, you learn about Sergeant Jack and about how he taught David Goggins, without saying these words, he taught him what discipline could give. There's one thing that I really liked that I highlighted. If you give me 1 second. Yeah, right here. So this kind of describes who Sergeant Jack was. He goes, born in 1905, he came of age in southern Indiana during the height of Jim Crow, when it was dangerous as hell to be a black man in America, and a wrong word or look could spark a lynch mob. His parents were poor, and he wasn't babied as a kid. His formal education ended in the 4th grade when he had to get a job to help support the family. So when I landed in his house, he passed along what he learned. What they taught him worked as far as he was concerned. He had a military pension. He owned his house free and clear. Same with every car in his garage. He had money in the bank. Sergeant Drac was squared the fuck away. And he got there with self-reliance on detail and discipline. And David Goggins, when he gets there, this is like post him leaving his dad's house where it was traumatic and there was no like baby period. Sergeant Jack just immediately taught him, hey, these are things we do here. There's a list. And before you can do anything else, this is the list. And he never told him, I'm proud of you or good job, because like he's like, what you're doing is already the minimum. But that dynamic really just struck me. I don't know why. And then at the end, finally, when David Goggins graduates to the the Navy Academy, fucking Sergeant Jack was there, tears in his eyes, proud of his boy, because that's how he showed love for you, by just showing you like, hey, this is the recipe. This is all I know,
Yeah, that was a epic and pretty impactful in Goggins' upbringing. He strayed away from what he learned from his grandpa, but in the end, it was super impactful on his life because he disciple of discipline, and that's where it started. Right. So we'll move into my most impactful story. The most impactful for me was the Moab 240, his first attempt. So in this book, he talks about the 2 attempts of the Moab 240. So the Moab 240 is an ultra marathon that covers 240.3 miles and over 30,000 feet of elevation gain in Moab, Utah. 100-mile marathons had become more mainstream, which Goggins deemed more accessible. So Goggins looked for the new deep end, as he put it. Goggins did it because he knew it was the next hardest thing, a graduation from the shallow end he had existed in to the deep end where he needed to be. Goggins dealt with many trials during this race, trials such as serious heat, extreme cold, loss of circulation in his extremities due to Raynaud's phenomenon, getting lost, in turn adding 15 miles to his run, missed thyroid medication intervals, a hospital visit where he was diagnosed with high altitude pulmonary edema. So that's just lungs filling with blood and plasma. So Goggins illustrates many great lessons in this story, lessons such as maintaining situational awareness at all times. He states, whenever I go into a non-thinking mode, I always fail. Moving on, not making a bad situation worse by blowing up on teammates. So when he got lost, he decided to allow navigation with his running partner, his pacer, and he let them do the navigating. They ended up getting off trail. They get lost. And so one of the big things he says is, accepting responsibility for the mistake and doing what it takes to fix it immediately. It doesn't help at all to just blow up and be angry. It's just going to make things worse. And the greatest lesson of all, you're not finished until it's over. Goggins had to leave the course in order to get medical treatment for his high altitude pulmonary edema, meaning he took a did not finish in the race. When David was in his Airbnb after getting out of the hospital, he had a thought that woke him up from his sleep. You're not done. He woke up his wife and crew, and with that, they returned to the race where he had originally left. He finished the race, the last of the race, but didn't receive a medal. In fact, he wasn't even allowed to cross the finish line. This illustrates that he didn't do it for the praise or the accolade, but did it for himself. This was an extremely powerful story with many great lessons in it. So, there's a lot of pitfalls and failures that happened through the race, but he used them all as learning experiences. And, when he had he couldn't breathe, he's gasping for air. He goes to the hospital. He feels good. There's still time to finish the race. He didn't sit back and be like, okay, well, maybe next year. He got up, went back to where he had failed and finished the race. And it wasn't because, I want the medal or, I want to say I'd be able to finish it. He literally was like, I just need to do this, Yeah. Crazy. So that was a huge story in the book. And that's chapter 6 for you guys that had read along. So if you guys like that, drop a comment down below why it was your favorite.
Yeah. Cool. So moving to chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 follows right along where Jay just left off. Where he takes off, he doesn't finish the race. Obviously, there's a lot of detail in between 7 and 8, but I think I want to capture the essence of being. I forget how he claims to what he calls it, but he states to himself, he's always calling audibles. He's always in this mindset of life's going to throw shit at you. If you're in this stagnant mind, you get comfortable, or if something doesn't go your way, what's your play call? What's your next step? And that's not to say you're trying to predict the future by no means. It's just, what mentality are you developing? And he gives an example. He gives COVID for an example, the whole shutdown. A lot of people, their lives turned upside down, and they really had no, I guess, backup plan, if you were to put it simply. But I do want to give a little bit of story on why I think the audible play calling is such a crucial, give me a second to pull up, crucial in David Goggins' arsenal, why he never talks about it. I guess he does talk about it, but it's more of like, I like how he puts it in this book. Mm-hmm. So when he first ends the Moab 240 in 2019, he has to go to the ER. They diagnosed him, and he asked one of the assistants, or I can't remember what the doctor was when he was on his way out. It was an assistant to the doctor, and the doctor the assistant to the doctor pretty much said, "You're fucked. Like, you need to stay off this knee. You're not going to be able to run." And he gets back the official report. It confirmed multiple tears in his medial and lateral meniscus, a sprained posterior cruciate ligament, general cartilage breakdown, arthritis defects in the lower tip of the femur, a massive Baker's cyst behind the knee, and top it all off, partially torn ACL. And he shows you a screenshot of all the things that the doctor analysis was. And he only mentioned, like 8 or 7 things. And on the list, there's 14 things. And he goes on to explain, he's explaining 2 weeks obviously wasn't enough to fix my knee, right? To get back into fire training, to get back into his regular routine outside of Moab 240, his regular daily stuff that he's pursuing. And so it continues on in the book. He says in the evening, the doctor he clears himself actually. When he goes back into fire training, the doctor drained his knee for 14
8 vials out or something.
Some large amount of fluid in his knee, and it was deoxidized blood. Mm-hmm. So it was black. But further into the chapter 7, and I really want to focus on chapter 7 because there's a lot of story in detail on why I think being able to call an audible in your life is so crucial. He says when he gets back to training, firefight training, he says in the evening as we approached the top of the slope, I stepped on a slick log cloaked by a leaf litter. Then he slips into, he hurts his knee again, right? That's what put him in the doctor in the first place, with the doctors in the first place from Moab 240. He goes back, he fucks his knee up. And he goes on to say, he says, the only thing more infectious than a good attitude is a bad one. The more you dwell on negative, the weaker you feel, and that weakness infects those around you. He says, nobody teaches you how to think, act, and move when disappointment, bad news, malfunction, and disaster. Or he says, move when disappointment, bad news, malfunction, and disaster inevitably strike, which means it's up to you to cultivate your own strategy and have the discipline to practice it. After you've been knocked down, it's important to take some time to understand what happened and strategize your way forward. You also must act. And I think that point blank period. I think a lot of people's formula to acting or to just get in the mindset is the equation with acting in it, right? You can get better with positive thinking and, what do they call it? Manifesting. Like you want to manifest a better life. You want to get better at something. But at the end of the day, it's going to take action. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say. It takes action to get better. And so he's going on about the doctor, Casey. He meets a doctor that he met prior, goes to Casey, and he lets him know you're not going to be able to do any of the stuff you're doing as you were doing it. You need some time off. So he puts his sole focus into doing everything else off of his knees. So he picks up swimming, he picks up cycling, he picks up anything you can imagine when you're not standing for a long period of time or running. And he goes on to say all of that to show you a year from that point, he completes Moab. He goes back and completes it in 2020. And he I think there's a second doctor visit after Moab 240, the second time in 2020. He fucks up his knee again, and then he goes to a different doctor, and that doctor completely screws him up. Mm-hmm. It really ruins him. And this is the point I really want to focus on is David Goggins at his low, the lowest that I've ever heard him been, or I've ever heard he's ever been at. Like, I've never heard David Goggins like, oh, I'm down and out. Like, this fucking sucks, and I got to wait 2 years. David Goggins has always been that person to play call and audible and change the route, whatever. He gets his leg, he gets 4 or 5 pilot holes screwed into his shin, or
top of the femur.
The top of the femur, because the doctor out.
Terrible.
And he recognizes he's not getting better. And so the book goes on, his story goes on, and he switches doctors because he doesn't believe that doctor gave him the best treatment to cure his knee and to cure him to get back on the road, get back in firefighter training. So he switches, he calls another audible, he goes to another doctor, and this doctor says, hey, I don't know if this will work, but if we go ahead with a surgery that will plant a metal plate in your knee, there is a possibility, like a very slight chance, that this will heal your knee and be able to get you running again, right? And he's like, let's do it. Stop everything. I want this done now. And a few months goes by. Obviously, I'm cutting the story, just getting to the points. It starts to get better. He's still off of his knee. He's not running, but he runs Moab. He gets back into firefight training towards the end of the book. And I think all of that just to say, it's not like this is how my perspective is. Obviously, you guys might have a different perspective. I think his play calling ability is so strong that he doesn't think about the next month or next week. He's so quick with it. When something happens, he's already thinking, okay, well, I'm fucked right now. What's my next move as far as like this next hour, this next 5 hours, this next week? If I need to go to this doctor and it fucked me up, I need to go to this doctor. And then if I can't run, I'm going to be on the bike. I'm going to be swimming. And his mind is always running. And I think that ability to play call, to call audibles, to change your life when it's required. I wish my ability was that strong, right? I wish I could play call on like a hot route like that. However, it just goes to show someone like David Goggins, you're not born with this ability. It's developed from his Navy SEALs training, from being a failure at a young age, from being abused and all of this stuff to get him where he's at now. And I think he's just trying to show people like, you're going to have excuses, but recognize your purpose, right? We've had that conversation. Your purpose isn't going to be the only thing that's going to carry you to the finish line. You just need to know how to carry yourself to the finish line with just pure action.
Yeah.
And you'll get to that feeling when you want to do shit, but right now just keep going. Yeah. So ability to play call.
Quick correction too. It wasn't the femur, it was the tibia, the top of the shin bone.
That's what I thought. I thought it was like lower than
like, so it's the top of the shin bone where it meets the knee. Uh-huh. They drill holes into that, and then they cut a chunk out of the shin to create a pocket where bone would grow between.
Oh, yeah.
And then they drilled into there, and he was down for 2 weeks or like 3 weeks. And then he got on a bike and rode with that fresh surgery.
Yeah. I think the thing that surprised me the most was the doctor didn't inform him exactly what the operation he performed on the first one. But yeah. And so David Goggins was sort of pissed. He was kind of mad that the doctor because I would imagine someone like David Goggins, your whole life is physical. That's all you know is like physical pain, fucking go-getter type mentality. So
that was a crazy story, dude.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's going to clear up my 7 and 8. I've solely focused on 7 because 8 goes into more detail, and towards the back of that gets into a different mindset outside of play calling. And so I kind of wanted to focus on 7. Yeah. But
all right, David, chapter 9.
Yeah. So, Chapter 9 was my favorite. There's this specific story in the last chapter where David Goggins is performing PLFs and smoke jump training. Mm-hmm. And those are parachute landing falls, right? Training. Mm-hmm. I think that's what PLFs stand for. Mm-hmm. And there's this like mock-up of like the aircraft, and it's like 20 feet in the air, and you're attached to this like bungee cord, and you have to jump off it to practice your exits when you're performing smoke jumping. Right. So meanwhile, Devin just covered that David Goggins had this really like insane surgery on his shin. Like they reconstructed his leg pretty much. Like it was just a surgery that, you know, wasn't, I guess, normal at the time, or isn't practiced that much. Yeah. So it's a pretty brutal thing that he went through. You know, is still training hard, and he's performing these landing falls. And there's this person. There's a female. I don't think they referred to her name. He just calls her PB for pit bull because she had a lot of dog in her. You know what I mean? I liked this point in the story because when you go and read it, you'll see that David started to see himself in people when they were in the moments of fear, when they were right about to jump out of that mock-up of the air carrier. Mm-hmm. And especially with her, he notes that, you know, she walks up to this the edge and she backs away. She gets really scared. And David, you know, when he was watching her, and he looked at her, he saw the fear in her eyes that reminded him of himself when he was going through the training for buds, right? Or, the swim school, because he wasn't a naturally good swimmer. I remember him in the last book, Can't Hurt Me. That was like one of his biggest
pararescue
fears.
Training too.
Right, yeah. And so his special, I would say, like one of his superpowers is that he can get anybody to just show the fuck out, you know? And he basically was inspiring her to just do it because he looked at her and he said in this part of the book that, you know, he typically doesn't use profanity around PB, but in this moment he told her, you need to fucking jump, basically, because when it's for real and we're up there in the sky, whatever situation happens now is an example of how you're going to be when you're up there in the real deal. And so he tells her to look fear dead in the eyes and jump. And he notes back to this idea of like horizons, right? Like the horizon between the line between blue and black, which is another example of the previous chapter where this guy, I can't remember his name. Let me see real quick. He mentions that like we've all seen the Red Bull jump out of the space skydive, or there's cameras and there's all this equipment, right, to put something on as like a spectacle thing for people, like on I don't know, to the masses. But there's this guy noted, Captain Joseph Kittinger, in the late 50s, who did basically something similar, if not the same thing, on his own, with no guarantee of success, right? So he defines greatness as the line between blue and black. Like when you're up there and you don't know, the horizon's gone. Your trajectory of like knowing if you're going to succeed at something isn't in sight. And he did it anyways. He jumped out, and he mentions that that's like the spirit of an explorer, someone who's ready to seek things outside of what's like known to be possible. And I think in that moment, he might have sparked PB to do the same thing for herself, you know, to look fear in the eyes and jump towards the horizon, or jump towards something that she just doesn't know. She doesn't know if she can do it. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting story for me personally, just seeing how, you know, the old David Goggins would have laughed or mocked at someone who didn't know how to do something or was like crumbling by fear. That was actually more fuel for David Goggins, I think, in like Can't Hurt Me. But here, you know, he's showing signs of, you know, humility, maybe a lowering of his own ego. But his thing was like, I'm going to get everybody to do it. I'm going to get everybody off, and we're going to perform well and show out. And I thought that was just like an amazing story, you know?
Yeah, I think one thing to mention too is that when she's turns around and he sees the fear in her eyes, he tells her, the more you think about it, the worse it gets. So stop thinking and just do it.
Stop thinking. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sure we can all relate to that, you know, in our lives, right? The more I think about something, I just get frozen. I get analyzed. Analysis paralysis. Quick decisions are the easy solution to that, but it's really not easy. You know, sometimes it's weird what your mind can do to you to kind of paralyze you with fear.
Yeah, and I always like applaud John because of that, because he'll just be like, all right, well, we got to do this. Just like there's no hesitation. You know what I mean?
For real. So. Yeah.
Some of us are better at it than others, but it's a skill. It can be learned.
It is, and we all have it. I like really how too he mentions towards at the end of the book, that we all have that sense of doubt that'll grow in those times of fear when we're just we're ruminating on our thoughts, right? Mm-hmm. And you can overcome your sense of doubt with belief, right? Belief takes doubt out of the equation, and I love the way he puts that. So what I wrote down for myself is I'm going to aim for the horizons in my life, right? If I can see them, but if I can't, then I'm going to rely on belief to get me there. And seeking greatness is that like very thin line between the blue and black, and you don't know where it's going, but you get your sense of greatness from just the attempt of trying to do something. And I think that's what greatness is it is essentially. We're not guaranteed anything. We just have to try, and we can demonstrate greatness for others if we do that, and we can break cycles of family, I don't know, trauma or curses or whatever you want to call it, right? Like we can all do that, and we all have the ability to do it.
Yeah, he says greatness is in the valiance of the attempt.
Yeah. It's I want to read that quote because that shit's too fire. That was my favorite quote of the book, right? So it's page 303 for anybody who wants to read, but the last sentence of this paragraph says, whatever it takes for you to believe that you're better than good enough to achieve your dreams is what you must do. And remember, your greatness is not tied to any outcome. It is found in the valiance of the attempt.
Yeah.
Banger.
Yeah, I think that goes, that coincides with maybe a few pages. You said 303. So this one's on 278, and he says, identity is a trap that will keep you in blinders if you let it. Sometimes identity is what we are saddled with by society. And he goes on to say on 279, there are no prerequisites to becoming great. You could be raised by a pack of wolves. You could be homeless and illiterate at 30 years old and graduate Harvard at 40. You could be one of the most accomplished motherfuckers in the country and still be hungrier and work harder than everybody else as an attempt to conquer a new field. And it all starts with the commitment to looking beyond your known world. Beyond your street, town, state, or nationality, beyond culture, identity, only then true self-exploration begins. And I think that, just think if you're watching this, like how many times you've thought like, this is who I am and this is who I'll be forever. If you're like in the middle of college, or if you're like graduating high school, if you're like in your 30s, right? Like you identify with just your job. And that's just as much as you identify. Mm-hmm. I think it's good to kind of break that and society is not like this mass thing that I think when I hear society, it's not this mass thing. It's your friends, it's your family, it's how they perceive the world, and they push that perception onto you. And it should never hold anybody back, but I think it does to this day. Society is a powerful.
I have a question, on the spot question for everybody. How do you know that you're seeking your own sense of greatness? Or what do you do to explore that? Because it's different for everybody, right?
Can we get into that in the main topics of chapter 9?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to rein us back in towards the main topics of the book. So the way this book was sold was the idea that there's a philosophic breakdown at the end of each chapter. So we have evolutions. It goes chapter, evolution. And each evolution is it's a mirror. It holds it up to you and it tells you this is what you need to do. And it's a philosophic breakdown of a Goggins idea. So we're going to go through those individually. In evolution 1, he talks about distracting injuries. It's important to note where he gets this idea from. When he's doing emergency medical services, he talks about these traumatic scenes where you'll show up and it looks like this person has, he's just completely destroyed. Let's just say this person's completely mangled. But that is a distracting injury to what's the biggest problem, right? So a distracting injury is something that distracts us, a minute problem compared to the biggest problem. So he mentions identifying the most important injury and addressing that first. So one of the other ideas he mentions is the golden hour. So we have a period of time when we have a problem. That is the golden hour that we need to act. If we miss that time, we have declining results. So that was the major topic of evolution 1. Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
I would think maybe some people hear like distracting injuries, or they're solely thinking about an injury, right? Like how could that be applied to the real world, right? Like
that's a good question.
Because they understand like what you're saying. I would imagine the audience understands what you're saying, but they don't have all the detail from this book. Like we're kind of feeding that to them. So when you hear an injury, obviously my take on it would be, right, like just think of simply like you have to get to work. Is eating breakfast more important than getting your car started? Which one of the two is more important? Right, like identifying the major problem, which probably in that situation would be making sure your car starts to get to work. Eating breakfast can come maybe later in the day, eating some lunch, but that's not the mass issue or the problem that will prevent you from getting to work and getting your day running.
I like to think in the physical sense. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, with the car thing and the breakfast thing, it's just like, well, you could break it down in a bunch of ways. It's like, well, what is more important? Because what if you show up there and you're not fucking doing anything because you didn't eat breakfast? But the physical way, I like to think about it, especially with a book, like we just talked about, Goggins had this gruesome surgery that's like archaic where they open up your shin bone and they drive like these 4 like railroad spikes through your shin to hold it together. And then he runs 240 miles. And then I know people who, like, I talked to this guy at the field today who's got a dog. And I go, what do you do in your free time? Because he's retired. And he's like, well, I used to golf, but arthritis. So, and then we talked and I go, is the arthritis so debilitating that you can't golf? And he was like, well, I mean, pain limits people to doing the things they like. And I thought to myself, well, what's worse? Because this guy's old. I was like, the amount of years you have left not doing something because of pain, or the pain you get the short amount of time you're doing the thing you like, the remaining amount of your time left. You know, it's like a juggle. But people let like exterior things diminish what they're capable of doing. You know, even myself. You know, I get like sprains and bruises and stuff, and I try to muscle through. That's how I was raised. That's how my dad raised me. But then also I read a book like this, and I go, I can do more. You know.
Yeah.
And even if it's a little bit more, that's one thing that I like about reading these books is that David Goggins just shows an archetype of someone who's like, I'll live here in hell. Try me. you know? And even if you take like an ounce of that to yourself, being tougher is better for yourself to live in this world, you know?
Yeah. And even if he doesn't know what his limits are, he'll just go and fucking do it anyways, you know?
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yep. Find the new deep end. Yeah. All right. So Evolution 2 talks about self-talk. We'll kind of, glaze over this one real quick. But he mentions recording audio and listening back to hear how much of a bitch you sound like, right? He would record audio, listen back and be like, man, I didn't like the way I sounded. I have to change something, and then do it over and over again. So one thing we want to mention is, the importance of self-talk is really illustrated well in the book, As a Man Thinketh. So as you think, your life will be, right? So if you want to learn more about self-talk, we strongly recommend you go pick up As a Man Thinketh. It's like 30 pages. 50 pages. So
it's like $5.
Yeah, it's $5. Go pick it up. It's something good. It's a great place to start.
Yeah,
okay?
For sure.
So Evolution 3 talks about the mental lab. So I wanted to mention what Goggins' mental lab attributes were, and then we'll get into what does that look like for each of us. Mm-hmm. So Goggins' mental lab attributes are a moratorium on all things soft, stop taking most calls and text, and tuned out and turned within. So we'll start with John. What does the mental lab look like for you?
Yeah, for me, my daily mental lab, I like to think, is when I run. I run for sure every night. I like to run without headphones. Something about running at night is very common. Most of the town or city is like asleep. And I find myself just thinking. Also, that's my big mental lab. I like to review about what's going on with the day. And then I also, in this mental lab, I like to dream a little bit and envision a future that I want to do for myself. And I think that's healthy, because if you're dreaming, it means you're thinking about the future. And I'm only thinking about a good future for myself. So that's what I'm aiming towards, And then you pair that up with a physical challenge, you feel good. You feel good. after.
Yeah. So you have your mental lab is by doing things physical, but without distractions. So no headphones.
Definitely so. I like to do something physical that you can kind of go like autopilot on. Running for me is like one of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. How about you guys? Anything other than physical?
I would say meditation. Meditation for me is a big one. It's that form where you can get out of like your head. Because that's what meditation is for me. It's kind of like you just quiet everything and you kind of just from a third eye or a third perspective or a third person perspective, you see your thoughts coming in and then going out. And it gives you this dynamic that like maybe you didn't have before. And you kind of just cancel the world out and you recognize like this 15 minutes is only 15 minutes. And like, what if that kind of brings you back? Like, all right, I'm about to get it. I'm about to go back to doing what I need to do. Anxiety, stress, depression, these things held me down for a little bit, but I feel normal again. I feel back to myself. That's what kind of gets it for me. Obviously running, exercise being the biggest one, right? Like if you don't feel like doing anything, try and challenge yourself. Like wake up early, go hit the gym and see how you feel that day.
Yeah.
Like I would imagine that everybody that does that feels amazing throughout the day, but my mental lab is solely being able to isolate my mind some way. If it's not so much running, I have to be somewhat focused because I'm not a runner. I don't focus on running. But I would say meditation and strength training is probably that like where I can clear my mind of everything. And it really just brings me back to like a baseline.
Nice.
I like. So that's mine. I don't really know anything outside of physical.
Yeah.
It's hard.
David, you have anything to add on top of physical?
No, mine's physical. Just like John, I'll run, you know.
Yeah.
I will say I do run with music though, but I do feel like I am in my mental lab when I am running with music. I listen to like hardcore EDM and it sounds weird, but I really get to just think about like what I want. It gives me a lot of like drive, and my mind goes directly to like, all right, like I'm going hard, and I try and block out the pain and just fight through it. And I mean, even recently, John said something while we were reading the book, while we were getting ready for this episode. He was like, I was thinking about dropping my like pull-ups and push-ups because I'm doing nickels and dimes right now. And John was like, nah, this book should tell you need to do more push-ups.
Let's explain the premise. David was trying to explain like, how he's like, well, if I want to run more, I'm going to just do a little bit less push-ups and pull-ups. And I was like, why would you want it to go that way? Like the whole, like, no, you should get faster and stronger. Like what, like, you know?
Yeah. I wanted to like take a break in some areas in order to grow more muscle or whatever. But no, you're 100% right. Mental lab is definitely when I'm running, and then right after when I run, I'll just don't even take a break, just go straight to the pull-up bar. And you're like, I want to take a break, but I'll just like go to the pull-up bar and hang there and just start, you know. And
nice.
I always come out feeling more in tune with my thoughts, even if they're the ones that like I need to work on or like attack.
And see, a big reason why I got no music is not necessarily for the music thing, is just because I can't run with anything on me. So I run with nothing in my pockets. So like when I leave my part, like I got nothing on me, you know, I'm free. Because I hate the sound of like, actually this made me really happy, dude. Because I hate the sound of like things in my pockets that annoys me. But I was running the other night and I was passing this woman, and as I passed her, she was like, I really like the sound of your footsteps. And I knew exactly what she meant, because I like the sound of my footsteps too when I run. And I was like, thank you, I do too. I don't, but popped in my head.
I like the sound of your footsteps.
All right, I'll add on top of that, other than physical, for me, I feel like I do my best thinking while I'm reading or right after I read. So when I'm reading, my mind will drift. Like, so when I'm reading Never Finished, a good idea will come up that I read from David Goggins, and then my mind will drift, but I'm still reading. So what I'll do is I'll try to rein that in and continue reading. But if that's a really pressing idea, my mind will go there again. I'll stop reading, I'll pause my timer, and I'll write.
Yeah.
So like for me, one of the big things is while I'm reading, those thoughts will come up. obviously this is something that's bothering me if I keep trying to rein it in and I keep coming back to this idea and thought. So I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll write. And I noticed that my articulation and my thoughts are a lot clearer and a lot better post reading. So after I'm reading, so I have a target goal of reading each week. Every day that I read, once I'm done, I feel like I communicate better. I communicate my thoughts better and I write better. So, reading is a big tool for me that sparks ideas and gets me going fluidly mentally, and that I can, sit down and write some ideas. So writing is really big for me in terms of my mental lab, reading and writing. So that's what I'll add to that. So Evolution 4 talks about controlled anger, right? I know some people are like, oh, anger, how can that be a good thing, right? I'll extend the idea first. How can anger be used in life?
I think when I read this question, one way I thought of it, instead of just answering the question, I think that's obvious. Like that's an obvious way of answering. But I think a good way to answer this, start from the back, like almost reverse engineer it. Like, will you see your results if you're angry in the process? Will you see a different result if you're angry in that process? And I think the answer is always yes, because you're letting your emotions drive your actions. And there's a perfect example where David Goggins runs down the wrong path for 10 miles and he looks at his pacer and he's like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? What is he? So he explains like, I'm not going to sit there and get angry because it's going to use more energy and effort just to not do it. Like if I don't do it, I'll save energy and then we still got to go backwards. Like we don't get anywhere by yelling at him. I don't get anywhere by getting mad at him. So I think it shows in your results, right? Because imagine if David Goggins didn't spend like 15, 20 minutes drilling into this. Yeah. It would have changed his results in that. I'm not saying he would have finished, but.
So you're talking about Goggins controlling his anger.
Yeah, absolutely. All of us
not using controlled anger. That was more of a controlling anger idea.
What was the question one more time?
How can controlled anger be used in life?
Yeah, so I would think about it like this. Anger is a natural response that we have. It's like a defense mechanism. Things that anger you normally means that like you're in danger, someone that you care about is in danger, something wrong has been done. Like you've been cheated, someone cheated in the game. Someone you care about is in danger, like physically. You're angry because you want to protect them. These are all like alarm bells to trigger you to like be in action. But like, you use them as like exactly what I said, like an alarm system. Like a red flag came up, but then like you're not just a sailboat taken by the wind with your anger. You've now like assess the situation. You can act calmly. You can act like accordingly. That's how I would say you use it in life.
Right. And I think that's kind of in line with what Goggins was saying, mentioning controlled anger. He mentions that controlled anger should be like an alarm setting off to tell you that something needs to change. And using that to initiate the change, but not using anger to the sailboat method to push your sails. Anger is just, okay, something's off. I need to change something. Let's make this change, but do it controlled, right?
What was the question that you asked me when I went on about David Goggins? You said something. Is that controlled anger? Or is that being
that's controlling anger, but using controlled anger as a mechanism for change? How can it be used, right, in an action? So I think that was right. That's kind of where I was fishing for, is how Goggins was talking about it. So he presents an idea here about voluntary destruction, right? So I wanted to ask, is there a difference between voluntary and involuntary destruction? If so, what are those differences? Because, throughout the books, Can't Hurt Me and Never Finished, what Goggins is looking for is destruction, voluntarily going and pursuing that.
Yeah. I mean, just like in a simple analogy, okay, one, you're on a cross-country road trip in your car, okay? You pop a tire. Involuntary destruction. It's fucking, you have to deal with it, okay?
Okay.
Another scenario, you're at a race car derby and you brought your car to destroy it, right? You've already set things in order, like this car's going to get destroyed. It's all good. Right. Now, like, you put that towards anything, whether it's a career, physically or whatever, when you choose to like, you know, volunteer to destroy something, you normally set some things in order because you know something's about to happen. You're about to take a risk, you know?
Right. Yeah. So like voluntarily pursuing destruction, there's different mentalities you take into voluntary versus involuntary. Right. So I'll discuss one if you guys have another one. So it just reminds me of our Mount Whitney trip. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. We did a backpacking trip in Mount Whitney.
Yeah.
It's a voluntary pursuit of something
Endurance
that could lead to destruction, right?
Almost did.
You know what I noticed throughout that trip? Yeah, and it almost did, right? What I noticed through that trip is that we all volunteered to do that, right?
Yeah.
If somebody had been brought along forcefully or like against their will, right? Or they just didn't want to do it, it would have been involuntary. But because everybody was there voluntarily, there was no complaining, right? You can't complain if you did this to yourself.
And it's not just that too, but also there was a dynamic there where you can't let the group down, dude. Like whatever you're dealing with can't weigh down the rest of the group because everyone else is dealing with their own fucking battle, you know? And like I can't give that to you, you know? Like
shout out to Nick.
Dude,
shout out Nick.
We all were hurting, but dude, Nick was hurting real bad. Nick's a friend of ours. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like if you voluntarily pursue destruction, you can't. The value of your complaint is very, very little, right? Because you did this to yourself.
From the perspective,
So
our friend had hamburger meat at his feet by the last day, and you know by the end.
Beyond me,
by the end, we were like, dude, like you know, we were actually checking in, like, bacon. He's like, I'm fine, dude, I'm fine. We're like, woo, holy shit.
He had two flats.
Yeah, 2 flats.
14 months.
I had a slight patch job. I put the patch in, I put the plug in, I was fine, you know?
Yeah.
Dude, he has full blown out flats, bro.
For real. So one more as well, involuntary versus voluntary is the amplitude of grief, right? So if it's voluntary, your amplitude of grief is going to be a little bit lower than if it's involuntary. So the blown out tire, right?
Perfect example.
Right. So like if it's a derby, you're not going to grieve as much like, yeah, you know, I love this car and it's not working anymore versus like if you blew a tire or had an accident on the road, you're going to be a lot more, you're going to grieve a lot more.
Get to work tomorrow. Oh my God. Can I afford this?
Exactly. How am I going to deal with this? Right. So there is a difference between voluntary and involuntary destruction. And, you know, voluntary destruction is almost in line with quadrant 2, where it's like you purposely go and pursue, you know, breaking down and building up a new character.
Yep.
So one more thing to mention in this evolution, you know, you notice throughout Can't Hurt Me, you notice it throughout Never Finished that Goggins is enemy centered, right? So we wanted to discuss if we agree with that. And then we did notice a change in the end of the book, right? So chapter 9, he's not so enemy centered anymore. But, you know, he uses enemy centeredness to get through hard things, you know, armored mind, taking souls. These are all enemy centered ideas. And so, you know, it's just, enemy centeredness doesn't seem like a sustainable mentality, right? Does anybody have anything to add to that?
I would just say that that's why people are great, because they create this mentality that like nobody else has. Like,
what happens when there's no more enemies?
I think there's always enemies. Like you look at people like Kobe, Michael Jordan, and David Goggins, like they're always creating figures in their head, even when the person that they said did something didn't even do shit. But like they create this, they create things in their heads to keep them driven, because at the end of the day, they're in a battle against themselves. There's not a real enemy to them. It's like, okay, if you are a real enemy, I can only imagine they're going to go even harder.
It just depends who you are in the gear of life, dude. Like most of us who are not, and anybody can achieve great accolades, you know, but great accolades in different fields. Like maybe a scientist who's enemy centered doesn't get the same accolades as maybe an athlete who's enemy centered, like Michael Jordan or Kobe, when they talk about like them making up fake scenarios. But the thing, and I agree with you, Jade, my big like when I was reading it is that as like a philosophy book, which I don't really think this quite is, but it's a good book anyway. Is that like for most readers who are reading it, trying to teach enemy centeredness as a potential tool in the toolbox is not something that I would teach.
Right.
I find more that like if I'm community centered, I can find a lot more growth in myself that way. Because I'm like, I can be better, which then helps my community. If I'm stronger, I can then help others. You know, if I can read this book or whatever, can I like teach somebody after I read this book? That's the type of thing, you know? But then also, I think the only way inside that, I fucking haven't ran 100 miles. I haven't fucking done all this fucking cool shit or amazing stuff. So there's somewhere in between, I'm sure, right? Just saying.
Right. I think the only way that you could teach enemy centeredness in a non-toxic way, I'll use that term. There's two voices in our heads, right? There's the one that's like, man, just let's get a pizza and watch the game, in the words of David Goggins, right? So we'll call that the mediocre mind, right? And then there's the inner genius that tells you, go and pursue that hard thing. Mm-hmm. If you make the mediocre mind your enemy, then there's not a period in time that you will not have an enemy, and it's yourself.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only way I can see this being taught in a manner that's like actually beneficial to somebody's mentality.
Yeah. I don't see David Goggins as like, let's just keep it simple, like a toxic.
No.
And I think, realistically, if he stepped into anybody's life, he would improve a lot of people. But I think a lot of people are stuck in their ways. It's going to be hard to kind of
It all just depends on what point in life that David Goggins was in your life. You know, are you getting the Mr. Miyagi one right now, who's like 50 something, who's like accomplished these things and is still working? Or are you getting like the 27-year-old who's ready to fucking the demon who's ready to fucking kill you just to take your soul so you can run an extra mile? Like, you know, like, so. Right. That all depends. Maybe he wouldn't help you out there. Maybe he'd say you're a fucking punk bitch, and you would fucking go home, cry to your wife.
It was like
girlfriend or whoever. You know?
The enemy was like the world for David. Well, in the beginning, I can't hurt me. It kind of was like him, you know what I mean? Yeah. But then he was like, if you're, I'm gonna take your soul. Like he like directed it out to everybody else.
Yeah, but especially.
And then in the end, his enemy was like the comfortable bed with his with Kish. You know, he's looking at that like soft bed. He's like, he's looking at a soft blanket.
I didn't hear no bell. Fucking.
I know. He sees some soft blankets. And
turns it on.
He took one look at the bed and turned out and walked right out the door and ran. What did he run? Like 20 miles or something?
In the negative.
He's going to be the old folks home. Be like, I didn't hear no bell. Fucking racing.
For real. All right. I'll move us into the next evolution unless you guys have anything to mention.
Good.
Nope. Okay. So evolution 5. The big idea was humility, right? So he mentions, humility is the key towards growth, right? So how can one benefit from a willingness to be the fool or being humble?
I think that the willingness to be the fool allows yourself to have flexible borders on your potential. For my own life, I started jiu-jitsu about 10 months ago now. And going in as a 26, learning a new thing, I was, I'm the fool in class. I'm the new guy. I don't know how to do fucking anything, and on top of that, there's like some physical pain you deal with too. But because I got to learn something, I feel like the parameter that was me grew a little bit, because now I'm learning a new discipline and I'm getting a handle on it. And the more that I learn, I feel like the more I get to expand a little bit. And that goes with like the different things in my life,
Right. So John, if somebody was like, hey, I don't want to start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because I know I'm going to suck, what would you say?
I would say that's a fucking lame reason to not do something, lame. What,
Obviously, yeah.
Like everyone sucked at everything their first time. Like some people are like maybe they have attributes that make them easier for them to pick up, but no one's a black belt day one. Like there's a level to it. There's a way to it, as with anything.
Exactly. So in Jordan B. Peterson's book, Beyond Order, there's a chapter titled, I believe it's titled The Fool. And he mentions the importance of being willing to be the fool, right? The person that's not willing to be the fool never grows, never learns, because they've, I'm an expert in this. I refuse to step outside of this because I don't want to be the fool, right?
And I want to say too, if you're willing to be the fool, people are more likely to help you. Speaking from experience, me transitioning into becoming a teacher, I didn't know a lot about how all this stuff worked, but I wasn't afraid to show off my ignorance so I could get the help I needed. I could have been like, oh, I fucking know what I'm doing, and fucking everything blew up my face. But because I was so open about, hey, I'm very ignorant, I don't know what I'm doing, I would love for you to help me. Anything would help. A lot of people gave me a lot of support my first year, and they championed me. They were like, we want you to succeed. Good,
Yeah.
Right.
So they realized, he's got no problem being like, hey, I need help,
You and your homies got to be willing to be the fools.
Exactly.
The homies got to be fools sometimes. You know what I mean?
You might be wanting to change jobs right now, but are afraid to do it because you don't want to start at square one. But we all have to start at square one in order to learn something.
Be like, what's up, fool?
What's up, fool? I'm trying to learn, fool.
I'm trying to learn, fool.
You're the fool.
I pity the fool.
All right. So Evolution 6, he talks about the importance of who is in your foxhole. So he defines what foxhole mates are and what roles they play. So your foxhole mates are your inner circle. They know your history, are aware of your future goals and past limitations. They refuse to give up on you. They believe in and or understand your quests. They must accept you for who you are and who you want to become, and must give you permission to be you in both word and action. So when analyzing your foxhole mates, what qualities do you guys look for?
I'd say the biggest one is accountability. Like,
They can hold you accountable?
Yeah, I think we've, I can't wait until we spend some time to create a video around how we set up our accountability structure on the goal setting and stuff. I think that's really unique to us, but maybe somebody else out there does the same thing. But us here, we have a accountability metric that we've created for ourselves. And so each week that we meet outside of our recordings, we kind of go over why we said, not why, but did we accomplish our goals? And if there's proof that can be validated, then we'll validate it. But I think accountability, baseline, is number one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I met so many people in my life that are just they don't really care about my success. They don't really care about oh, that's cool, I thought you were doing that. Or I thought you were working here. Oh, no? Oh, okay, that's cool. You know what I mean? It's well, how was I talking to that person? Was I really telling that person about my life? Should they be concerned about where I'm at? I'm not saying they should be concerned about who I'm becoming and what I'm trying to do for myself, but it's more of those are your friends, right? What does a friend mean to you? Is it just someone that you hang out with?
Are all your friends foxhole mates?
No.
So your foxhole mates hold you accountable, but your friends don't.
Yeah, but I would say foxhole mates, let's just call it that. Foxhole mates are once friends at some point, right? I think you have, you don't just run into people and be like, that's a foxhole mate. You have to give your friend a little bit of time to kind of develop themselves, and also yourself too, to become that person's foxhole mate.
You have to earn the status to be let into the foxhole.
Yeah, and I don't think they're met at the same time. Let's say two friends, A and B. Friend A might be comfortable with being that foxhole for B, but B's I don't want you. I'm cool just being lazy and not really doing shit. That's an indicator. That's not a person to have in your foxhole.
That's not a fox. Okay. That's a snake.
I wouldn't say your foxhole mate has to be your friend. You can have foxholes for places of work. Who's your foxhole for your place at work? Maybe those aren't your friends, but they're the people who are and for me, when I think of foxhole, I think of dependability. So who's going to be there when they say they're going to be there? If we make a plan, are they going to show up? If something arises, are we just going to handle it? Can I depend on them handling it? I don't need someone necessarily to check in if I'm going to take care of what I need to take care of, because that's already on my to-do list, But I need to have the interdependentness to know that we can work as a team and that you're going to handle what you said you're going to handle. That way we can accomplish a bigger thing together.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How about you, David? Any qualities you look for in foxhole mates?
Foxhole mates. Yeah, I'm going to piggyback, say accountability. I'm also going to say no, just people that don't lie. You know,
Honesty.
honest people.
Integrity.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm like thinking about it wrong, but John said dependability. If a person's not dependable, would they be considered a liar? Right? They say they're going to do something like and they don't show up.
A liar is someone I think who intentionally bends the truth.
Well, and also you could just ask a straightforward question. Hey, like, do you think my girlfriend's a bitch? Like, tell me. Like, you know, like just tell me.
They're all, no, you're a liar.
Just tell me straight up. Like, you know, just tell me straight up.
You're holding him on the edge of the foxhole. You need to tell me now, or you're getting kicked out of the foxhole.
They're dependable. They're always
going
there,
out.
but they're like, dude, no, she's great. You know, but she's the worst. You know.
She's the best woman ever.
I want to see a fox in a foxhole.
Shit, no, you don't. I'm back.
What was that?
Bro, them foxes don't play. All right, so for me, qualities I look for is growth mindset. If somebody's in my foxhole, they cannot be fixed mindset.
That's a good one.
You need to be willing to bend and grow. You know, your mindset needs to be malleable, where you're not like, okay, this is what it is. This is how it's going to be. So growth mindset is one big quality. So I'll take us forward into evolution 7. He mentions the idea of self-oaths. So what is a self-oath and what is self-leadership? So a self-oath is a set of core principles, should be aspirational and challenge you to achieve. Self-leadership, self-leaders always demonstrate initiative, prepare before necessary, identify prerequisites of success, and start before being told to. They're obsessed with becoming the best. They set an example through their actions rather than their words. So, what should be contained in a self-oath?
One thing I want to touch on to all my anime fans, I think a self-oath is really healthy for an individual or a group or an organization, because it's something you set when you feel you're at your strongest, either emotionally or spiritually. And it's something that you can look back to maybe when times are tough and you're like, no, I made this promise that I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. Naruto has a really good one that he says all the time. He's like, my name's Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm going to become a Hokage. Another one he says is, I never go back on my word. That's my ninja way. It's my nindo. And he fucking says the whole fucking show, but he fucking does it. And it's because anime is just really good about encapsulating a hero arc. But yeah. So when I hear that.
Establish your nindo.
Establish your nindo.
Establish your nindo. All right. So the last evolution is evolution 8. And David talked about it a little bit, but, he mentions the importance of finding the black to blue line in our lives. So what does this mean? David had mentioned that guy that took the balloon up, got to the black blue line between the atmosphere and space, jumped off with no guarantee of success, and just decided to push the limit of human ability.
The literal definition of just send it.
Full send. Literally.
When we say no guarantee of success, I mean he didn't know if he was going to survive.
Hey, I want to put that. I want to put that in my foxhole. I want at least some. I want some full send, capabilities in there.
Full send mentality. Send mentality. Yeah, dude. You put that in your whole qualities?
My whole qualities.
that always makes me, when people say full send, like before John started saying it, I always thought it was like Nigel would say it, like skating, like full send.
Yeah, dude.
You're looking at like a 12 stair and you're like, fuck, I don't know if I can do this shit.
That's what he was saying. He was like, full send.
The only way to find out is if I really just fully send and commit.
Yeah.
And then
I was actually just having a conversation about this. In my childhood, I found how I got hurt the most because we would do stupid stuff like riding bikes and riding them off ramps, and like you said, doing stair sets.
Yeah.
I found I got hurt the most when I would hesitate and not full send something. And that's when I would get like the catastrophic fail, you know, because I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna, and then like that hesitation, fucking, like something would happen, you know. So I learned early in life, just roll 10 and fuck it.
Oh my god,
just do it.
Can't tell you how many times I rolled my ankle just because like I didn't commit.
Right?
Stupid.
Yeah. All right, so David, I want to extend the question to you. How is it beneficial for everybody to find the black to blue line in their lives?
How is it beneficial?
How would it benefit them?
Oh, how would it benefit them?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I would say you would be able to for one, head into the unknown and face your fears head on, and you could establish a sense of greatness within yourself, and you could figure out what that means, you know, for yourself. You could set some new boundaries or the new, like, I guess, standard for like how much you can do, and then work towards beating that again, right? So you can establish a sense of standard for yourself.
Okay, so you know where that the limit of your,
you will know, what the limit is, and be like, okay, like what else can we do? Like the guy who jumped off space.
It's true.
Jumped off space.
He came down and was like, damn, that was sick, but like what else? How higher could we go?
Jump out the universe.
Jump off the moon, bro.
Everyone jumped off the universe. That's funny.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that, you know, just so many benefits to that, right? Because if you don't try and if you don't commit, like, how are you ever going to really know where that limit is, right? It technically doesn't exist if you haven't tried it yet.
Right. Anything to add?
I'm yummy.
That was my favorite chapter. The line between black and blue. It's crazy.
I'll add, Jordan Peterson talks about the yin and yang a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Chaos and order. Mm-hmm. And Jordan Peterson says the epitome of growth is when you straddle the line between chaos and order, right? And that's the black to blue line, right? When you're talking about black to blue line, anything into the black is chaos, right? Anything beneath the blue is ordered, right? So we found this line, right? So that's one. Neji in Naruto, going back to Naruto, talks about the only way to achieve growth is when you go beyond your limit. Another illustration of finding the black to blue line, right? If you want to grow, you need to embrace a little bit of chaos. So you need to find that black and blue line in your life. Yep. And just push the envelope. And you continue to push the envelope. And by the time, you know, you're old and wrinkled, your envelope is huge.
And I want to point out on the beginning of evolution, number 8, so this one that we're on, in Goggins terms, which is David Goggins speaking, he says, greatness is a state of letting go of all of your faults and imperfections, scavenging every last bit of strength and energy, and putting it the fuck to use to excel at whatever you set your mind to. So it's interesting, like people, you know, he's defining it in terms of letting go of something, right? Because you have to let go of like how you view yourself, or like, oh shit, I don't know if I can do this, or what, like if I have the capabilities to, but that's an area I have to relinquish in order to figure out how to achieve greatness. And then the act of it attempting is greatness. So, you know, sick definition.
Oh yeah. All right. That is it for the evolution breakdowns. We do have a couple overall thoughts. Well, just one mainly that we wanted to discuss. So, you know, I brought this up and I'd love to ask David Goggins. Goggins, if you're watching this, I'd love to talk to you about this. So I believe there's a schism between Goggins' evaluation of the importance of purpose and how he lives. So he states on page 172, in order to execute on your willingness to succeed, you will need to be able to perform without purpose. You've heard of purpose, that magical missing ingredient, crucial to landing a fulfilling career and building a happy life. What if I told you the importance of finding your purpose was overblown? What if there was never any such thing as your good friend purpose? What if it doesn't matter what the fuck you do with your time here? What if it's all arbitrary and life doesn't give a flying fuck if you want to be happy? What then? So I believe Goggins had a purpose. and it is what drove him to the success he has. Yes, we have to perform when all things inevitably hit the fan, but knowing what your purpose is plays a significant role in the actions we choose at that moment. Ultimately, choices are predicated on purpose. Goggins, in order to get to the success that he has now, formulated a purpose. I want to be the hardest motherfucker to ever live. That's what drove him to do everything, right? Even in his darkest times, he had that purpose inscribed on his heart, right? So I think purpose is extremely important. It plays a role in all of our decisions. Ultimately, all choices are predicated on purpose. So if your purpose is to live a chill life, then you're going to choose a comfort position in whatever it is, right? So I wanted to extend that to you. Do you guys think that this is, some sort of schism in Goggins' writing and mentality, or do you think that, purpose isn't really that important?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Goggins did have a purpose, and that's why he accomplished all these huge things.
Right.
And I think the thing that like you're prying at is like, you said that everything you do is because of purpose, like your purpose.
Yeah. All choices are predicated on purpose.
And that, I disagree with that. I think the word purpose has a lot of weight to it. You feel that weight and you go on through your day with that, and it helps keep you based, and it helps push you. Maybe helps you build momentum when you're hitting a good spot.
Okay.
People who don't have purpose, their purpose to live a chill life or a comfortable life. I think we read a book a couple books ago called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. He refers to people as drifters and non-drifters. I don't know if you said it in the book, but someone who's a drifter, I would say, is someone who doesn't have a purpose. So sure, it's like they're kind of on autopilot. Sure, they wake up and they brush their teeth and they go to work and they fucking eat dinner and they go to sleep. But like, that's just kind of the bare minimum of like living the human experience. Maybe someone with purpose where like they're like, I want to make a difference in my community. How can I do so? Well, maybe on Tuesdays you fucking help out at the library. Maybe on the weekends you participate in something. Who fucking knows, But I think what a non-drifter would be is someone with some purpose.
Okay. So do you think purpose is overblown?
No. So
maybe
I think the point he's trying to make too is like, even if you don't have purpose, you can fucking still you can still go get to work. Like a lot of times I think I have an overall purpose of what I want to do, but maybe I don't have a purpose for this week or this month or fucking, this year. But I find myself, I still run every day. And I know I still go to the gym, right? I know these things help me just stay on track. I still eat healthy. I'm still doing stuff. I'm still signing up for classes. And even though I don't feel purpose into it, I know these are things I need to do to live a better life without doing these things, And maybe I could still be I'm still considered a drifter when I'm doing these things, but I'm at least a fucking better drifter than someone who's not doing these things. And I can find purpose in my life later. And I can find purpose in my life after I built myself up. You can always, it's never too late to find purpose in your life,
Right.
Okay. Was Goggins claiming he didn't have purpose at first?
What he was saying is that in order to execute on your willingness to succeed, you have to be able to put out without purpose.
I agree.
Right. But I'm saying that didn't exist in the success that Goggins got. In the beginning, he said, I want to be the hardest motherfucker on the planet to ever live. So that was his purpose.
But not everyone is trying to fucking beat David Goggins. Some people are just trying to be Joe Schmo. But maybe Joe Schmo with a better job and a better fitting pair of jeans after he loses some weight. I don't know,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. What do you guys think? Drop a comment down below. Is the significance of purpose overblown? What do you think? right? We all agree that even if you don't have purpose, you got to put it out, right?
That's why
But,
I'm sorry. Delete that.
All right, but what do you guys think is the significance of purpose overblown? All right, so we have some concluding questions. So who do you guys think he wrote this book for?
People without purpose. No.
People who don't put out.
People who don't put out.
Anyone who's read the first book.
Yeah, I would say anybody that you got to read the first book before you read this one. Like you're skipping a whole story of like this man's life. Like you got to get the perspective.
He knew we'd buy it.
And the dynamic.
He knew we'd buy it.
Yeah. He cleaned up, bro. He came raked in some more money.
I think
it's all good.
I think he also wrote the book for people that like think that that they're done. They do something hard. They're like, they wrap their hands up, throw the towel in. This is literally the title of the book is never finished, right?
Definitely.
So that's what I think. The title,
he talks about that too. About during these ultra marathons, some people this was like the one hard thing they're ever going to do in their life, and they'll look back on it.
Yeah,
right. This is fucking a Tuesday for me.
It never stops.
Never finished. All right. So why do you think he wrote the book? Not who, but why?
I think this gives a little bit more detail gives a perspective of detail that he didn't. Not only did he not cover in the first book, but he gives the detail of I guess we talked about a little bit earlier, a philosophical approach on longevity and being never finished with your task, your life, your goals, or whatever you're achieving in life. And like what we just said, like this may be the hardest thing you're doing in your life. That doesn't mean it has to be the last thing that's the hardest thing you ever do in your life. So I think that's why he wrote it, is just to show people like, I don't know.
So like catch him up to where he's at now and then do a philosophic breakdown of the mindset.
Yeah, the mindset. Okay. He gives you a little bit of that in the first one, but the first one is really just an introduction to who David Goggins is.
Like a testimonial.
Right. Yeah, because no one knew who David Goggins was before he dropped this book. You know what I mean? Like probably a small handful of people, but when he dropped that first book, it fucking took off. So
yeah, honestly, I think you nailed that. I don't have anything to add to that. So what was the biggest lesson you learned from this book, and how will you apply it?
For me, it just reminded me that my aches and pains are nothing.
Yeah, you put it in perspective, right?
Yeah, I go, this man ran, like I said, archaic, like railroad nails through the shin. And he was like, I ran 240 miles. So if he can do that, I'm sure I can run my 4 miles and be happy. Aches and all.
Right.
Yeah. For me, that the line from Black to Blue, that really thin glimmer, is like that opportunity for greatness, and I think that's going to stick with me forever. Is knowing that even if you can't see the horizon, sometimes you just have to full send and figure out what you're made out of and look fear in the eyes and go for it. And that's for anything in life that you want to pursue. And to remove, or what would we say? Belief takes doubt out of the equation. And so I'm always going to believe and just go for it. Yep. And also to embrace pain. Like John said, like what I'm really starting to train myself to do is like when I'm running like longer miles and doing more push-ups and pull-ups, I'm just trying to really focus and be like, take all of the pain in and feel it and try and go further the next time.
Oh yeah.
It'll teach you something.
I would say Evolution 3 really stuck with me. Anytime anybody ever talks about the present moment, that always sticks with me because I get in my head a lot about a lot of shit in life. And so I recognize at the age I'm at now is it comes from like thinking about the future. It comes from thinking too far ahead. And anytime anybody speaks about the present moment and how you break that present moment down into seconds to hours to minutes to days to months, like that always gives me a refresher in that area of my life with mentality. And there's a paragraph on page 93. He's like, respect is earned every day by waking up early, challenging yourself with new dreams or digging up old nightmares, and embracing the suck like you have nothing and have never done a damn thing in your life. And I think that's why people that are great, maybe are just mediocre, will continue to push to become great. The people that are great will continue to push beyond that. And the people even below mediocre are still trying to just get to the mediocre level. I think people are at all different stages of their life. I think one thing that sticks with me in every book we read, if anybody ever talks about a present moment, I think that's the most powerful philosophical lesson you can ever learn about life, is like, you can be gone in like the next 2 hours, right? Like, I think you just need to focus on right now. Get what you got to. Don't go to sleep with the red day. Hit the blue, hit the black. Before you put your head down, do as much as you can so you wake up on a good day, on a good note tomorrow. And all you have is right now. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from this book.
Nice. Mine, I like the idea of foxhole mates and like being cognizant of who you allow in there, right? Yeah. He mentions, some people allow foxhole mates to be family and like longtime friends just because of the amount of time that people spend with them, but not the mentality. So I'm going to take that and, I need to analyze what qualities I'm looking for in foxhole mates and how I want to be held accountable and who I want to join the battle with me. So I really like that. And I'm going to take that and use that in my life. Just to kind of, just like we have here, we have a set of counsel, and it really does benefit my life personally. So taking that and applying that to relationships I have around the board. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another installment of Paradigm Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and learned a thing or two. Before you take off, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment down below, follow us on all our social media platforms. All the information you need will be down in the description box below. Share this video, hit that little bell, it'll go ding, ding, ding. And that's how you know. So thank you guys again so much. And always remember, the work you put in now equals who you'll be tomorrow. Peace.
Deuce.
Go get the shirts.